I have been in a bathroom safety pinning a dress because a girl sat down and her dress ripped. Like, it's just like it could literally be anything. So on set, a lot of the time, it's just being on call and just being ready and available as a parent would with a child. Like, you're just there if something happens. The producers create the story and then they would leave and they need to sleep and they go leave and they still have to have someone that's on set.
Three, two, one. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Hollywood Lot Life, where we explore the ins and outs of the elusive entertainment industry. If you've ever dreamed of working in Hollywood or making it as a studio executive, then this is the podcast for you. This show is brought to you on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, so welcome to the show and thank you for listening. Today I'm really excited. I get one of my good friends, Kiahna, on the show to talk about what it's like to be a segment producer. Before we bring her in, let's learn a little bit about her job. Segment producers are responsible for casting the story arcs that shape the narrative of reality TV shows. They work closely with the cast, writers, and directors to develop the show's storylines and ensure that each episode is engaging and exciting for viewers. The job of a segment producer often involves a lot of travel. Depending on the show, producers may be required to travel to different locations to film scenes or conduct interviews with the cast. Segment producers often work long hours, with days that can last well into the night. They may work 6 or 7 days a week during filming, and the job can be quite demanding and stressful. One of the most challenging aspects of being a segment producer is dealing with the unpredictability of reality TV. Cast members may not always behave as expected, and producers must be able to adapt quickly to changes in the storyline. Despite the challenges, being a segment producer can also be a very rewarding job. Many producers feel a sense of pride and accomplishment when they see the finished product on TV and know they played a significant role in creating it. Segment producers must have excellent people skills and be able to build strong relationships with the cast and crew. They must be able to work under pressure and make quick decisions to keep the show on track. Finally, being a segment producer requires a lot of creativity and imagination. Producers must be able to come up with new and exciting ideas for the show, and they must be able to execute those ideas in a way that will capture the attention of viewers. So, with that, I would like to welcome on Kiahna. Kiahna, thank you for coming on the show.
Hello, everyone.
So, Kiahna is a segment producer within reality TV, working on hit shows such as The Bachelor, Shark Tank, Lego Master, RuPaul's Drag Race, and The World of Dance. Is that all true?
That is all true. Those are fun
Very
shows.
fun. Okay, as I was reading that, I was thinking a bunch of travel, and I'm sure you've done a ton of travel. Where was the coolest place you got to travel to for work?
Oh gosh. I think one of my favorite places that was Croatia. I was also watching Game of Thrones while filming. So it was really cool because I didn't even realize that they had filmed in Croatia. So I was watching it on my TV screen and then I was like actually walking through the streets that they had filmed some of these places. But I think Croatia was something that it wasn't even on my bucket list of places to go, and it was really cool.
That is so cool. What show was that for?
That was for The Bachelor. We were there for about 5 or 6 days, and I was lucky enough that I was one of the people that landed before the cast arrived, and so we got there and got to kind of like set everything up for the day, and then we had the whole day to like walk around and travel. But I think the one thing they don't really say about traveling when you're working is a lot of the time these shows you're just kind of cooped up in hotels and you don't really get to explore and see the scenery. But I do feel like the traveling that I have done on the show, I did get the opportunity to travel and sightsee and explore.
That's so cool. Well, this makes me think, what is even a segment producer besides, that whole long thing I just read? To you, sum it up in like 2 words.
It is a liaison between the cast member, production, and like executive producers.
So like for The
So
Bachelor, what does that mean?
for The Bachelor, it is, you're doing a lot of communicating with the cast, you're creating those relationships with the cast members, and you're communicating those needs and those feelings with, senior producers, executive producers, also with production. If it's something like so and so needs isn't feeling great, that's something we're communicating with production to connect with the EMT on site to come help. So it's a lot of kind of like you're the person that if cast is emotionally distressed or frustrated or needs something, that you're kind of their first stop.
That's really cool. Well,
Yeah.
I've got so many questions that I'm like thinking of right now, but let's take it way back to the beginning. Are you originally from LA, or where are you from?
I am from a cute little town called Lehigh, Utah. If anyone has seen the movie Footloose, the Kevin Bacon, the original Footloose, they filmed they filmed a lot of that in our town, and we have like the roller mills where they did the huge dance at. That's right next to my high school. So I'm from Lehigh, Utah, and I moved to Los Angeles probably about 6.5 years ago.
Wow, that time has flown.
I know.
So
There are no
who
seasons in LA.
that is so true. Um, so you're from Utah. What inspired you about the film industry, or who was really the person that made you want to go into film?
I don't know if there was a person that inspired me. I was in a place when I was in college where, you're at that. I did all my generals and I was in a place where it was like, what next? Like, what are you going to major in? And I remember seeing this like podcast or something, a TED talk that was talking about trying to find something that you're passionate about and you're good at. And I remember writing like a grid down and really trying to like figure out what that looked like. And the one thing I knew was that I was passionate about movies and I loved movies. So we just so happened to have a digital media with an emphasis in cinema production program at Utah Valley University, where I went to college. And I majored in that. But the funny thing is, when I majored in it, I honestly didn't have any realistic expectations that I would actually come to Los Angeles. I think I was just honestly doing it with like this small idea that I maybe would work in movies, but I think I had already written that off, that it was not an option. And I did event planning for 3-4 years after college before I even it wasn't until I was like, I'm going to move to California, that then that plug came back in and I was like, oh, wait, I have a degree in film. I should do film.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's crazy that you did event planning for that long and then you were finally like, oh yeah, the original thing that I'm passionate about, I should probably do that.
Well, and I think going back to that TED talk I was telling you about, I wish I had it because I wish I could go back to it. But it was like this idea of trying to find something that you're passionate about, but also finding something that you're good at. And so I felt like I went down, when I chose my degree, I chose something that I was passionate about. But as I was in college, I also fell into student government, and I was an exec on student government, and I planned all the activities at my college, and I was really good at it, and I also really enjoyed that. So I think that then when graduation came, it was this feeling of like, yeah, I think movies and cinema production felt like a pipe dream, and it didn't feel realistic. And so I was already doing event planning and I was good at it. And so I went down that route. And then again, 4 years later, one day at a 9 to 5, working as an event coordinator at a real estate company, I was like, this is not it.
I'm out.
I am out. And that's when, and again, it was like all of a sudden then it's kind of rechecking yourself and being like, okay, well, what can I do now? Because again, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go to LA and be a movie person. It was just like, where do I want to move? And so a lot of the jobs I was applying for when I originally was looking at Los Angeles and New York and Seattle, like I was looking up like event coordinating positions. I wasn't even thinking about movies. And then one day I remember just cluing in that like, oh wait, Ellen DeGeneres is filmed in LA. Like, oh wait, Disney's in LA. And it kind of made that decision that like, I should just give it a go. And so I moved to California.
Wow. So you literally hopped off the plane at LAX with your dreams and your cardigan in your hand. And then what did you do?
So close. I actually drove down in a black Honda Civic, completely filled to the rim with my cute mom in the front seat with her feet up because there was stuff on the floor. But I landed in a cute town called Pasadena. I shared a room for $575, which
Hey,
I
that's a
didn't
good
know the
deal.
girl. It was a good deal, but for a shared room with a stranger, not ideal. Um, I spent a lot of days on Hulu. I remember rewatching The OC. I remember watching, uh, what's it called? There's actually a reality show that's based on The Bachelor that now I'm having a brain
Oh,
fart and I can't remember what it's called.
I don't
Do you know what I'm
even
talking
know.
about?
No.
Oh, it's called Unreal. So, someone that used to work on The Bachelor actually created a scripted show called Unreal. And I think that was me really manifesting because I watched Unreal and it was just so fascinating to see like the behind the scenes, even though it was scripted and it wasn't accurate, completely accurate. Um, but yeah, I did that for a couple months. It was a lot of applying for jobs. I was on Indeed. I applied for so many jobs and I did not hear back from one. And actually, I did hear back from one, actually. I have to tell this story.
Tell
I
me.
heard back from one, and at this point, I had kind of given up, and I was like, I'm gonna do a waitressing job. Like, I think everyone in their life should be a waiter.
And
I've
it's
never done it
iconic
before.
LA.
Yes, I'm like, I kind of loved the idea of like being a waitress, like doing the hustle and bustle. So I applied for this job called Red Robin,
The
and
restaurant.
the restaurant Red Robin, and I finally got a call back for an interview, and I was gonna go in and meet with him in person. I was so excited. I got all ready, and the day of my interview, I'm in LA. I don't know where I'm going, and I pulled up in my GPS and I typed in the address, and it was like 3 days and 42 minutes. And I was like, that's weird. And I went and looked, and I had applied for a Red Robin in Pasadena, Texas, if that's even right. Not
Oh
Pasadena, California.
no.
So
Oh
I called the
no.
person and I was like, I am so sorry. I am not going to make it to our interview today because I'm in California. And we kind of had a little giggle about it. But that was the one and only job I heard back from out of
Wow.
all of the jobs I applied for. And I was applying for waitering jobs, I was applying for
Literally
like
anything.
film jobs, for anything. And yeah, it took me a second. It wasn't until my little sister had a connection, someone who knew someone that got me a job as a audience coordinator. And that is what really kind of got me on set.
What was that first show you did?
The very, very first show I did, it was called, I think, Legends of Comedy. And it was in downtown LA, and it was just this small little comedy show where they had a whole bunch of comedians come in, and we were in charge of like loading in the audience. But anyone who's ever been to LA, and specifically downtown LA, it is so disgusting and gross. And that was like my first image of like, this is what the industry is. Like,
The
this is what
grind.
I've signed up for.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, it was so bad. Like, I literally, Jackson, it was my first or second day. I was loading people up. Like everyone was in a line and we were like loading them into the theater. And I watched this young woman. She was, I don't even know if this is accurate, homeless. I don't know. Is that I don't want to say anything inappropriate. But I watched her walk over and there was a bird that got hit on the road. She picked it up. She took a bite out of it,
Whoa.
stuck it in a brown paper bag, folded it up, and then got on a bus and drove away. And I was
No,
like,
no.
that was like first or second day working, and I just was like, what did I just do? Like, what am I doing? But that was
We
like
are
my
not in
very, very,
Kansas anymore.
yeah. And I also did not work with someone very nice, and I remember getting screamed at for something, and I was like, oh, this is the industry. This is what I signed up for. And, like, oh, you gotta have a thick skin. Like, but that was kind of like what I remember about my very first gig.
So you survived, obviously. Where, like, how did you get out? Were you just like, oh, I'm done with this show, I'm gonna go to a new show? Or what was like your thought process behind all that?
The cool thing about this audience gig is you were working on multiple shows. So we handled all the audience. Everyone thinks that like all these shows that there's all these like free people coming, and there are some, like America's Got Talent, a lot of people are there to just see the actual show. But then there's a lot of other shows like this Legends of Comedy, or there's like the Jim Jeffries show, or
Dr.
Nickelodeon's Kid
Phil.
Choice Awards,
Hmm.
Dr. Phil. Like, these are paid audience members, and so they're coming and you're checking them in through the process. But you got to work on a lot of shows, and so very quickly I was working on the finale of Dancing with the Stars. I was working on American Idol finale. I did America's Got Talent. Like, you were kind of, and some shows were scripted. We worked on this scripted show called, I think, Prince of Peoria or something, which was also really fun. But we mainly were just loading the audience in, and then it was fun because then you kind of just got to watch the actual show and then load them out. But I did that for almost 2 years, and I think the good thing about that was it got me comfortable on set. I learned how to use a walkie for the first time. I kind of understood where to go on set, where not to go on set, when to be quiet, when to enter into like an onstage area if a light's on. Like, you kind of learn the lingo. Like, there's a lot of like little walkie lingo, like 86 or go for me, that you wouldn't know. And so I think this audience job was really great just to get me experience on set.
So now are you applying for jobs and hearing back, or were you referred to a different show? Give me the walkthrough of that.
So at first I was doing the audience job for a while, and it was nice because I was making decent money. I was working great hours, and I also like met some of my good friends from that show or from that job, and we were constantly bouncing around together to different shows working. But it wasn't until the problem with that job is when filming season was high, it was great hours, but the when it was slow. And so that's the problem, I think. Not the problem, but like the hardest part about this industry is like the dependability on it. And your job is really based on if there's something being created at that time. And so we were going through a lull, and I remember working like maybe 1 or 2 days a week, which was not cutting it. And so through this time, I was also kind of just, you start meeting people in the industry, you start meeting people at parties and talking to people. And I had loosely made a comment that I was like, oh, like, I just wish I could work on The Bachelor. Like, that's my dream. And probably about an hour after I left my friend's house, I got a text message from her, and she was like, I don't know why I didn't think about this, but I have a friend that works on The Bachelor. And she's like, here's her information, reach out to her, tell her you know me. And I was driving when I got this text message. And so I actually remember seeing the message and then forgetting about it. And
No.
probably another 2 months went by, and I had
No.
that same thought where I was like, oh my gosh, like, I just wish I knew someone that worked on The Bachelor. And I remembered, like, oh my gosh, so-and-so sent me that contact. And so I went through my text messages, I found the contact, I emailed her that day and was just like, hey, I'm friends with so-and-so, like, I would love to. I remember sending this like long email that was like, I will do anything to get on set, I will take out the trash, I will do whatever you need me to do, this is my dream. And she reached out to me the next day and was like, hey, I can totally forward you to so-and-so. And someone knew someone, and then they were asking my availability, and I was on set. So that's kind of how the Bachelor situation happened. It was very random, and the person that connected me isn't even in the industry. It was just someone who knew someone.
Wow.
And I really do believe that it was like all timing too. Like, I think if I would have reached out 2 months earlier when I initially got that contact, they weren't filming at that time. So I think I would have just been thrown in like a pile of other people. So I think I just reached out right time to this person.
Wow, how awesome. And that's coming from working as a crowd person right before.
Yeah, I was, and so I kind of had to go back to my audience person. I didn't quit though. That's the thing is like, I just kind of told him, like, hey, I got this opportunity also on The Bachelor to work as a production assistant, which is a different job. Um, but it was something that I knew the longevity of that was going, like, there was more room to grow within that than there would have been within the audience job. And I know that I remember them not being too happy because it was also a busy time for them and they felt like they were losing someone, but it was what it
Such
was.
as
And
life,
I
yeah.
did Bachelor. I know. And I did Bachelor for a couple weeks that first season. I think I only worked like 3 weeks. And then it was over. And then I had still kept that relationship with the audience people. And so then when it ended, I just kind of reached back out to them and I'm like, hey, like, I'm available again. Let me know if you guys need help. And they very quickly started throwing me back on shows. And I remember the rest of the year I worked with that audience company again. Because Bachelor was only, you're as a PA, you're only getting brought on for those couple weeks that they're at the mansion. And then they leave and then they're not filming again clear till January or February. And so
So you're grinding through these times, you're jumping around from show to show. Do you find a longevity show or is it kind of still all these shows are just super short?
I think at the time everything was super short because again, when you're working on the shows, there's different types of positions on the show. If you are a producer, you are working before the show films, during the show, and after because you're contacting cast members, you're planning out what the show is, creative like the creativity on it, and then you're also like doing post, afterwards, and then you're already working on the next season that's happening. But when you're a PA and you're there just logistically to like take out the trash and fill up the coolers, like those are a lot of like only in the moment production type jobs. So I was bouncing around from that show to my audience job, and then just any moment or opportunity that I had to work on other little shows that I would meet people, I would jump to that show. And sometimes the filming was a month, sometimes the filming was 5 days, And so it's a lot of like filling in your calendar and a lot of networking and meeting people to get your next job. It definitely is a grind. Like I went through a phase where, again, I was at a party. I met a friend that was also from Utah, and I just kind of loosely was like, yeah, I work on The Bachelor. He's like, oh my gosh, I work on World of Dance. And I was like, oh, I would love to work on World of Dance. That's like one of my favorite shows. He was like, yeah, for sure. Like, here's my contact. And it was just me reaching out to him and him forwarding on my resume. And then World of Dance actually was already filming, and I missed the boat on that. And they're like, but we're doing RuPaul. Like, do you want to do RuPaul? And I was like, sure. And, that job led me to meeting someone who worked on Shark Tank. And they were like, oh, I do the hiring for Shark Tank. And then I got on Shark Tank. Like, so a lot of the industry is meeting people.
Okay, so you're jumping around from job to job and you're going through all this. What advice would you give to somebody who's like trying to make it and like is going to interact or encountering the same issues you went through?
I would say my biggest advice to people is that this industry, unfortunately, is not so much what you know, but who you know. And I think it is really important, and it will be a very valuable skill set of yours to be able to rub shoulders and talk with the people around you, whether you're going to an event and meeting people, a party. Like I said, like one of my like main connections that got me on Shark Tank, World of Dance, Bring the Funny, like RuPaul, like that was a friend of a friend that I met at a party. And so I think it's being able to put yourself in situations to talk to the people around you, but also not be afraid to let them know that you're available and let them know that you want to do these things. Because again, you just never know who knows, like, you never know who knows who. And
Yeah.
it just takes one person. My friend that got me on the job for Bachelor, she is a model, and she just happened to have a friend that worked as a coordinator on Bachelor. So you really never know who you're talking to and who they know. It could be someone you babysit for, it could be someone that you like, it literally could be anybody. So I think it's just being really good at like creating relationships around you and also speaking that into existence and like talking about it out loud and letting people know what direction you're going in.
Yeah, that is so true. I'm thinking like if you would have never have said anything to your friend about wanting to be on The Bachelor, they would have had no idea that that's what you would wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, the cool thing right now that we have is technology. So, like, to be honest, like before I even moved to LA, I followed a lot of producers. I would see photos on Instagram of like the producers with the cast members, and I was like, oh, who are they? And I was just this idea that they were on set with them was so fascinating to me. And I followed a few of them and like fell into their DMs. I did not get any responses, but you just never know. Can I actually tell a funny story about that?
Yeah, of course. We love funny stories.
Okay, so one of the producers that I fell into their DMs was this, or I think I had emailed him. I had someone was like, I have a friend that works on The Bachelor. Here's his contact. His name was Bradford. And I sent him that long email that was like, I will do anything. I will take out the trash. Just get me on set. And I never heard back from him, obviously. And then I moved to LA and I had been here for a couple years, finally got on Bachelor, was working on Bachelor. And it wasn't until this last season when I was Gabby's segment producer and he was the producer next to me that one day he showed, and I never even connected that this was the same person. He came up to me one day and he goes, I was looking through my like draft emails last night and I came across an email from you back in like 2018 and it was him. And
No
now I
way.
was working alongside him like 5-6 years later. So it's just insane how like you just got to put yourself out there, reach out to people. It takes one response. I still send my resume and DM like directors, like the director of Stranger Things. Oh gosh, what's his name?
Sean Levy.
Something Levy. Sean Levy, yeah. I just barely sent my resume through Instagram and was like, I'm just thinking outside of the box. Like if you're looking for someone, like I'm available. Like you just never know.
Smart. Yeah, seriously, you never know. So tell me if you can say this or not, but like what's it like to work on The Bachelor? I have a lot of friends who love the show, who all want to know like working on The Bachelor, not the show itself, just what your conditions are like. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think so. I love The Bachelor. It is long hours. We work like other shows like World of Dance, Lego Masters, like you're working in the day and you get done at like 7 or 8 p.m. at night. Everyone goes home and you all come back the next day. Whereas Bachelor, you're filming 24/7.
Wow.
There's always a camera crew. They're always filming a date at nighttime. These dates, I think people think end at like 1 a.m., midnight. These dates sometimes go to like 4 or 5 a.m. And so you're filming throughout the night. And then if you're not filming, you still have to be on call for, there was a season a couple years ago where someone fell out of a bunk bed and like, like there was some, and I don't even think they had camera crews available and they had someone pull out their iPhone and there was like a shot of him holding his nose because he had a bloody nose, and then they used that later on for creative to show like what happened in the preview. But yeah, I think the hours are long and you work with a lot of different types of personalities, which is honestly my favorite thing about working for the show. You meet a lot of really cool people and you have to learn how to adapt to different personality types, and you get to know a lot of really cool people too and be friends with them. Like that's probably one of my favorite parts is the people you get to know.
Yeah, I can totally imagine. So what are some of the like types of things you would do on set? Like they're asking you to stay there. Are they like are you taking care of that guy who fell out of the bunk bed or what's going on?
Kind of, yeah. Like you are, again, for a long time, the position I held before segment producer was called a talent handler. And so you are handling the cast, which is like honestly an on-set babysitter. You are the person that is primarily in charge of the logistics of, waking them up, putting them to bed, like ordering that shirt that they needed because they didn't bring, like a lot of boys come to the show and they bring like five shirts and like one tux. Like Nate from Michelle's season, the gentleman I talked about earlier, he brought two tuxes, and one of them he didn't even like. Like, he had no idea that he was going to win the show. He thought he was going to be there for like
The
five
one night?
nights. Like, they just
Hmm.
have, like, no one brings enough. And so, those things of like, oh, so and so needs two more dresses, or like, like, it can be something as simple as so and so has a zit on their nose and we have a fanny pack on us that literally, like, I was known on set as like having, it was like the Mary Poppins bag. Like, I had everything you could ever think of, but it can be something as simple as eye drops, concealer, like we had the Listerine strips, and so anytime they were about to walk into like a chat with the lead, they would like, hey, do you have a Listerine strip, that you would hand them because they can't have gum. Like, it could. I have been in a bathroom safety pinning a dress because a girl sat down and her dress ripped. Like, it's just like it could literally be anything. So on set, a lot of the time, it's just being on call and just being ready and available as a parent would with a child. Like, you're just there if something happens. The producers create the story and then they would leave and they need to sleep and they go leave, and they still have to have someone that's on set in case something happens with a
Wow.
cast member. Yeah.
That's so fun.
It is, except for it just depends. Like, again, some nights it's the best. They all come home, they go to bed, and you're getting paid while they sleep. I did a lot of night shifts on that show, but there was a day where or I won't name her, but she's one of my favorites. She got really sick, and in the middle of the night, I just like she came into like the little area I was at, and she's like, Kiki, I don't feel good. And she had thrown up. And this was in Paradise where all the girls like sleep in the same room, and she had thrown up all over the floor. And so we were in there with my iPhone, like trying to clean up throw up, and I'm by myself, like it just there I think everyone thinks that everything is like so glamorous and fun, but like I've had to get throw up out of a sink before. It's not always as glamorous as you'd think.
Yeah, like you think, "Oh, I'm working on The Bachelor. This is so much fun." But then there's times like that, which leads my to my next question of like, you don't have to name any names, but like, were there annoying people where you're just like, "Can these people just be off the show already so I don't have to deal with them?" No, you don't have to name any names.
Yes. I won't name names, but yes, it's so unfortunate too, though, because you want to get, again, it's like anyone, though. It's just there's different personality types, there's different people that you get along with. Um, there was one specific contestant that he was the slowest human I had ever met. Like, you would answer the door and he'd like slowly open it, and whenever you'd call him, it was just like, hi, how are you? Like, it was just everything was so leisure. And then when there's moments where you're like, we have to go, like there's cameramen, there's people waiting for you, and he would just, you'd be like, hey, be ready at this time in this shirt. We're going to pick you up and we're going to go to your ABC photo shoot. And then you'd show up and his shirt's off and he's in the middle of ironing it. And then he wants to come on in. Like, I have a few questions for you. And that was someone that was, I remember just being like, please go home, because you're with them. You spend so much time with them, and there is constantly this urgency. The joke on set is always hurry up and wait, because you have to like be ready, be ready, be ready, and then something will happen, and then you're all sitting there waiting. But we're kind of the ones like, we have to be ready. And yeah, so we definitely have some contestants that just do little things to get on your nerve, and you're like, I wouldn't be mad if you go home.
And did they go home that night? Like, I don't know. I'm just thinking of random things that I think of.
Yeah, if someone does get cut, they usually do not go home that night because, again, we're filming sometimes till 4 in the morning. So if sometimes these guys get cut at a rose ceremony, they're being taken to a hotel to figure out logistics, figuring out where they want to fly out. And again, a lot of it just depends on the situation. And like some people get cut and then the lead immediately goes into a spiral of like, oh my gosh, I regret that decision. And so depending on where they're at in the process, sometimes they will hold on to people a little bit longer just to kind of see what happens.
Interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah. But yes, most of the time they do immediately. There's been contestants that get cut or send themselves home and they're on a flight 4 hours later and they're out of there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So now we've been talking about where you're going and all this stuff. Was COVID ever a factor, and how did that play into your, timeline?
Unfortunately, the 2020 COVID was a huge impact on the entire film industry. I was currently working on World of Dance, and we were like 3 or 4 days away from filming the finale. And I remember there were talks of it, like COVID was happening. You would hear, we were all seeing it on the news, but we didn't really know how impactful it was or how serious it was. And we just started hearing rumblings like, oh, they're pushing this date because we're going to hold on set. And then it was like, okay, we're canceling the audience, because we were ultimately like 1 or 2 days away from like finishing the show. And we had like led up until this huge competition and these dancers had like been battling it out. And it was the final battle between the two. And they canceled the audience and they did this like very low-key skeleton crew, which felt extremely weird because for dancers, trying to dance with no audience is just really awkward. But then ultimately that was it. It was just like we wrapped up the show. I remember they were we had a lot of contestants that were from like China and Hong Kong and like Switzerland, and they were shutting down like, airports were getting shut down. And so it was just trying to get people out as fast as you could. So I remember, and then everything shut down. It was just no one heard of anything. Nothing was being picked up. Everyone was trying to figure out how to keep filming, but keeping it safe on set. And I felt like that was the peak of not the peak of my career, but like, as far as like the amount of jobs I had coming in at that time, I was working every day. Like, I kid you not, I would work like 23 days straight. I would have a day off. I'd work 22 days. I'd have a day off. So financially it was great. And it was fun because I was switching off I was going in between a Disney show called Fam Jam, World of Dance, and Bachelor. And I was kind of bouncing between, it was like a giant puzzle piece on my calendar. I was just trying to fitting it all in. But then everything just kind of stops. And I think at the time I was so grateful because I was working so much. So it was like, oh my gosh, but we all thought it was going to be 2 weeks. We thought this was like 14 days.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was like, sweet, I'll take 2 weeks off. Like, not realizing like, oh, this is like going to be 4 or 5 months of work. And you can't really do my job like at home.
So then once COVID kind of simmers out and things are getting back to normal, are you back on The Bachelor? Are you jumping from show to show like you were doing? Kind of continue the story post-COVID.
Yeah, I won't even say post-COVID. I'll say during COVID. We got really lucky. Bachelor was one of the very first shows that was able to create a system that worked. We are lucky enough that when we're filming with like the same people the whole time through. So they created bubbles, as you can say. So we would get, one of the hotels we went to was in New Mexico, and we created a bubble, and everyone there we all went in like a week and a half early. We all had to get tested. We were all in quarantine in our own, like, it was the most weird thing. Like, I remember like getting off a bus and like we had a test prior, and then we got off a bus, walked up to an empty table, grabbed a key card, walk to our room, like no one is directing you. This is all just figuring it out. Going into your room, and then you'd have an email that was like, "Welcome to quarantine." You'd get a knock on your door 3 times a day with breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and you would have testing people come to your door, test you, and then you would do that for the first day. The first time we came back in a bubble. Oh, I forgot. It wasn't New Mexico. It was Pennsylvania. It was Nemacolin for Matt James's season. And we were in quarantine for, I want to say, 7 days. So for 7 days, we got tested twice. And then when we got out of quarantine, you still had to be masked up. And then you had contestants flying in that were being tested, put in quarantine. So the process of filming something that normally takes 6 to 7 weeks was now taking 9 to 11 weeks when you added in quarantine and all the COVID testing protocols. But I felt really lucky. I had a lot of friends in the industry that weren't working at all. And I was lucky enough that I had that Bachelor connection, and I had been there long enough that I was one of their first like go-tos. And so the minute COVID, like they were able to get the ball rolling, I was one of the first calls, and I worked all of Matt James's season and then had a break, and then we did New Mexico. And then that next year they filmed 4 seasons in a row. Normally they filmed 3, and they filmed 4 that year. So I worked that whole next year, 2021, back to back. I was gone for primarily 9 months out of the year, filming. So I felt really lucky. I had a job. And then when COVID lifted up, like, we got to travel a little bit more, and that interaction just kind of became, our days got shortened, but now other shows were opening up. But I think at that point I was working enough with Bachelor that I primarily stayed with Bachelor since post-COVID.
That makes sense. And are you still on The Bachelor? I don't know if you can talk about that or not, but
I am currently not on The Bachelor. I love The Bachelor so much, and I learned a lot from the show. I grew a lot. I met some of my very, very favorite people from that show. But I think I came to a hard thing about this industry is trying to figure out the work-life balance. And I think for a long time I was willing to sacrifice that balance a little bit because of COVID. Like, we spent a lot, we were all imbalanced. We were all at home doing literally nothing for months at a time. So I think the minute we were able to go back, I kind of hit the ground running and just was like so willing to like just do anything and everything to make money and to be busy and to be out of my house. Like, I felt very lucky that I was working and doing things, knowing that like my friends at home were still just at home because no movie theaters were open. Like, nothing was open, and I didn't feel the impact of COVID as much because I was doing things. But I think after a year or two of doing that, that kind of weighed on me, and I was realizing like, oh wait, like, what is my life outside of the show? I wasn't able to go to church. I wasn't able to go to the gym. I wasn't able to hang out with my friends. I was missing, milestones in my family's life, like birthdays, and, I missed some of my good friends' weddings, and that stuff weighs on you after a while. And so I think it got to a point where I was okay with kind of like taking a step back and just kind of reevaluating. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm in a reevaluation phase. I'm trying to figure out what my next steps are. Do I want to stay in reality? Do I want to try to get into scripted? How do I want to be a part of the industry but still be able to come home at night and have a life, ultimately?
I feel like anyone working production has to ask themselves those questions. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So I guess this leads into perfectly into my next question. So for you, what are some of the best parts about working in the industry as a whole? Favorite things?
Favorite things is there's something about the energy on set, I can't describe to people. Like, there's something so cool about being a part of a group of people that are creating something that you just only a small amount of people get to witness in real time. And it's exciting to know that you're creating something that people down the road are going to get to see. And I think being a part of that was so fulfilling. And I had so many pinch me moments where I was like, I am doing, like, I have the coolest job in the world. And I really don't think a lot of people get to experience that. And I feel very, very blessed that I love my job. Um,
Well, and what I was going to say is,
yeah.
and the millions of people who want to do that. I know so many people who are like, oh, I'd love to work on The Bachelor. Oh, I'd love to be on the contestant on The Bachelor. Like, the fact that you got to do that is so cool.
I think that people assume, like, pre-moving from Utah, when I was in Utah, like the idea of working on a movie set, like I said, felt like a pipe dream. It felt like it was so unattainable. And now doing it really, anything is possible. And I think that that's been such a cool thing for my future self to know, but also just like my friends or people that are looking to get in the industry. Like, it's not impossible. It really is it is a very real possibility to come and do the things you want to do. It does take work. It does take timing. It takes a little bit of luck. It takes networking. There's a lot that goes into it, but you will never know unless you try. And so I would say that's my biggest thing for people is just like, you have to at least try. You'll never know unless you put yourself in the situation.
Exactly. Totally. That is a great piece of advice. This
Yeah.
makes me think of like, did you have like a mentor or a role model that really influenced you or helped you that you could turn to and ask questions?
Not really, actually. I don't think so. I feel like I'm one of my, like, I didn't really know anyone in the industry. There was one girl named Kristen. I hope I'm saying her name right, that I was connected to. She worked on Ellen DeGeneres, and she was one of my first phone calls when I moved, like before I moved out to LA, and she was the one that connected me to my friend Bradford. Like, she had some advice for me, but I think I went to lunch with her one time, but really none of my jobs ever played out through that. If anything, it was practice to put myself in situations again, just to like meet new people. But I didn't really, I wouldn't say I had a mentor. And now I'm gonna kick myself if like I get off this podcast. I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I forget about them? Like, there are definitely producers on the show, specifically Bachelor, that I became really, really close with, and they were the people that I was like, that is the type of producer I want to be. Absolutely. But as far as like from beginning to end, my experience in the industry, I kind of was just like, paving the road as I was going.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Well, I mean, you've done it so well, and it sounds like an awesome career.
Thank you.
Do you think 5 years from now, are you, this huge Hollywood producer working on a TV show or working on a James Cameron set? Like,
That would be a dream. This is where I'm at, is I think in your life you have these milestones of like what's next. And when I first moved to LA, I kind of set this like 5-year plan, and I'm at 6.5. I've been here for 6.5 years, and now I am in a place of reevaluating, and I don't know what my next 5 years looks like.
wow,
I I want to be in the industry. I love the industry. I am still very passionate about it. I don't know what that looks like. I think the cool thing about this is like, I thought I wanted to be a producer on The Bachelor, right? And I got there and I got up close and personal to it. And then I realized that I actually don't want to do this. This isn't the lifestyle I want. I see producers that are away from their families for months at a time, and that's just, the longevity of that is not what I want. And I think maybe when I was 26, sure. But I'm 32, and I'm at a point in my life where I'm trying to figure out what my career looks like. And I hope it's being a cool producer on set. I hope it is. I would die to work on a Netflix show. I actually, fun fact, I just sent in a resume to work on a Netflix show starting in June. It's a scripted show. I don't know what it is yet, but So we'll see. Like, I have no idea what yeah, fingers crossed. I think Netflix would be a really cool door that would be fun to walk into, and connections. But I don't know. I feel like I have a large question mark happening, and it's been happening for the past like 6 months, and I'm just trying to figure out what that looks like.
Until you're, pulled into the Upside Down and working on Stranger Things, and then you're all
That
sucked
would
right
be
back in.
honestly the dream. I would love to work on a really cool. I think right now, like, the dream would be two things: would be either to work on a scripted series like Stranger Things or White Lotus or The Last of Us, like something that's up and coming that is just getting started, and to jump on board with that would be really cool. But also, I think I'd love to do like an Access Hollywood or like the Drew Barrymore show, like something that's a little bit more consistent and structured, but still allowing you to be like very in deep with like the creative stories that are happening around you.
Totally. And more consistent work kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the consistency would be very nice.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Kiahna, for coming onto my show and, taking the time to tell your story. I think it's so fun. I thought of so many questions, and I was just, I'm so glad that you could answer them for us.
Thank you for having me, Jackson. This was so much fun. And I really do think that this podcast will be so helpful for so many people that are looking to get into the industry and just trying to figure it out. And again, like, my biggest advice for anyone is like, you have to start somewhere and just take that leap of faith and go for it. Because if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And so you gotta try.
Oh, great words to the last words to live by. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And for everybody listening, please subscribe to the show. It's the only way, we keep making episodes. And if you're on YouTube, liking the video would be awesome. Or on Spotify, just following this show would really mean the world to me. And telling your friends about the show just to get it exciting and out there for more people to learn and, hear the stories like Kiahna. And we're excited for the show. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.